Hello, today I want to give you a little review on one of my more vintage watches. This is a watch from the 90s, probably from the early 90s, and it is a Sekonda alarm watch. The layout is a little bit reminiscent of Vulcan crickets and Gigli Cultre Memovox, so it's a kind of a pleasant appeal. The watch has a diameter of 35 millimeters, but it actually wears a little bit larger because the dial is so wide. As I said, the watch is an alarm watch, so it has 4 hands: an hour, a minute, a second hand, and in addition to that, it also has a hand where it can set a time at which the watch will ring an alarm. I will go in the details of the movement in a second, but before that, I want to show you how to use the watch. So the two crowns that you have on the right side of your watch, the upper crown is for the alarm mechanism and the bottom crown is for winding the watch because it's a hand wound watch and for setting the time. With setting the time and winding the watch, it's pretty much like every other watch. You can wind it as long as you feel a slight resistance, and then you should not go beyond that, or definitely not go beyond that, because at that point you will break the mainspring. For setting the time, pull the crown, the movement is not hacking, so the second hand keeps running. And with the upper crown, it's also basically a hand winding of the barrel of the mainspring for the alarm mechanism, and you can also pull that crown to set the time at which the watch should ring. The watch itself has really nice, almost vintage proportions. It's not very high. There's a screw down stainless steel back. The case itself is probably brass, covered it in chrome. Most of these watches are in actually pretty good condition. They're not necessarily very expensive. It has a plastic crystal on top, which also gives it kind of a vintage feel because you will get very charming small scratches on it. There's basically no way to avert that. The dial itself is, parts are brushed and parts are, I don't know, basically polished. There is lume on the dial. I suspect that this is still kind of a tritium lume since the watch is from the early 90s. Sekonda is actually a British brand from the UK, but it also, or mostly, equipped its watches with movements from Russian production. Since the early 2000s, Sekonda doesn't really have any connection to Russian watchmakers or watch producers anymore, and sources most of its movements from Asia. Nonetheless, this watch is an interesting feel because it's basically a rebranded Russian watch, and it has a little bit of that feel to it, but it is also very close to, as I said, Vulcan crickets, and also in style a little bit of the memo box, or in general in the style of the old traditional vintage alarm watches. The movement in this Sekonda is a Russian Polio 2612.1, which is basically a carbon copy of the AS 1475, which was used in the Western Hemisphere, which is actually quite a high quality movement, which was used in the 1960s in watches like Girard-Perregaux alarm watches. The movement is basically a kind of two-in-one configuration. You have the normal gear train that is for timekeeping. You also have a additional train with an additional barrel and mainspring for the alarm function. And the alarm function basically has two wheels, a hammer, kind of a lever escapement, if you will. So it's kind of like a shortcut of an escapement at the end. And you can see that right here. The small ratchet wheel on the right hand is where the energy is stored, and below that you can see a wheel that is a little bit similar to a escapement wheel, and then you can see a lever, like in a lever escapement, interacting with it. Instead of a balance wheel, on the other hand of that lever is a weight, and that weight is actually the hammer that gives you the alarm function. You can clearly see how that works here in the video. The reason why it's not very loud without the case back is that there is a pin on the case back that the hammer strikes against. So the case back itself works as kind of an amplifier to enhance the noise of the watch. Thank you for sticking around and watching this video, and if you have questions, just write them down in the comments and I will answer them. For now, that's it. I see you next time.